Hello and welcome back to Born to Rant. I'm Brandon, and today we are diving deep into one of the best, or depending on who you ask, the worst video game adaptations of the 90s. The movie that gave us Nils Allen Stewart as Bo Bobo, and of course the movie that gave us the second best villainous performance of Robert Patrick's career. That's right, today we are taking a look at 1994's Double Dragon, directed by James Yukich and starring the aforementioned Robert Patrick, Alyssa Milano, Scott Wolf, and Mark Dacascos. We'll dive into the movie's surprising ties to John Carpenter, Breaking Bad, and Batman the Animated Series, how it all came together, everything that makes the movie still worth watching today, and its legacy over 30 years later. Now, this is a movie that my younger brother and I were completely obsessed with as kids, which is weird because we never owned it on tape, but I think it really was just the fact that the main characters are two brothers that do martial arts and have cool color-coded outfits.
Not that my brother and I ever did martial arts.
And if you watched my video on the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, you might remember me talking about my dad bringing home what we called ninja tape. Well, my brother and I were always happy to use ninja tape to pretend to be the Double Dragons. But this was a movie that really, up until the time that cable stopped being a thing, if I stumbled across it while channel surfing, I was watching it without question. However, before deciding to cover it for the channel, it had probably been a good 15 years since I last sat down and watched it from start to finish. And man, I gotta say, this movie held up way better than I would have expected. Like, it's not what I would call a good movie, but it is super entertaining and has a lot of little moments that have stuck with me for decades now, like the power core, the dragon wagon, the brothers' little BFF handshake, the explosions, and of course, Robert Patrick's sick frosted flat top. But before I start going too far down the road about what I enjoyed rewatching Double Dragon, let's quickly take a step back and learn a little bit more about how the movie came together. And it all begins in 1987 with the release of the arcade game Double Dragon, which was a pretty instant success on the arcade scene. Fast forward to the early 90s when the Double Dragon animated series was developed. So anyway, the show was a mild hit, and this led to Imperial Entertainment Group acquiring the film rights and developing the movie, and the development actually starts with kids author Neal Shusterman and Paul Dini, who you might know as one of the godfathers of Batman the Animated Series, where he won an Emmy for the episode Heart of Ice, which is just one of the best episodes of the show, hands down. But anyway, Dini and Shusterman were hired to write the first draft of the screenplay, and as far as I can tell, they were fired shortly after turning in their draft, though they do still end up getting story by credit, but the final writing credit would go to Michael Davies and Peter Gould, who would actually go on to write a casual 105 combined episodes of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. No big deal. As for the director, this is actually the only narrative film ever directed by James Yukich, but he's directed roughly 10,000 music videos, everyone from Iron Maiden to Genesis and even the freaking Muppets. And real quick, I have to just stop and shout out Christian Genzel, who happened to interview Yukich a couple of years back, and it really is a fascinating interview and was a huge help for me when doing research for this video. So if you want to know even more behind the scenes stories, please go check out Christian's interview with James Yukich. But in the interview, Yukich talks about his frustration with the main producers of the movie, all of whom thought the movie should be doing something a little bit different. There were the two Shaw brothers, no, not those ones, who really thought this movie should be a kids movie, and then there was Alan Schechter, who really thought the movie should be more of an action movie that appealed to kids than a proper kids movie.
Lock 'em up.
So behind everyone's back, he was spending money to create crazy weapons and vehicles. And all of this actually put Yukich in a tough spot because he agreed with the Shaw brothers, but it was Schechter that had actually brought him on as director because they'd been friends for years, and Schechter was actually his PA on a ton of music videos in the 80s. As far as casting stories go, there's not much out there except for the fact that Robert Patrick was the only actor to come away from this movie with a nice payday. So with the director and cast in place, Double Dragon was given a budget of $7.8 million, and on September 7th, 1992, the movie would go into production, and the first chunk of filming would be done in Cleveland, Ohio, and it sounds like the only real reason they filmed in Cleveland is just because Schechter is originally from there, and he just wanted to film there. And while filming the boat chase with the big explosion, which used 700 gallons of gasoline combined with 200 gallons of alcohol, the explosion caught the residents of the area so off guard that there was a huge spike in 911 calls for the next hour after the explosion. But the thing about filming in Cleveland is that even though the locations might have been cheaper and the rates they were paying crew were a little bit lower, the weather in Cleveland in the fall is just not what the movie was needing, so they ended up having to pause production a few different times, and in November of 1992, the Shaw brothers called it and decided to pause and relocate production back to Los Angeles, where they would primarily shoot the Power Corps headquarters, the morgue, and the truck chase. However, moving production back to Los Angeles was no easy feat and required a full 7-month break. Well, according to IMDb anyway. There was also the fact that originally Tony Mitchell was hired to be the cinematographer for this movie. However, just a couple of days into production, he slipped and hurt his back, and he maintains that the chiropractor that the producers hired for him actually made everything way worse. Also, apparently he shot this scene and operated the crane from a stretcher, which is pretty badass. However, when the producers saw him operating from a stretcher, they decided that was the final straw, and Mitchell was fired, and they brought on Gary Kibbe, who was famously John Carpenter's cinematographer for the second half of his career, even shooting what I think is Carpenter's most underrated and one of his best looking movies, Prince of Darkness. But anyway, more on Kibbe's cinematography and John Carpenter in just a bit. Because on November 4th, 1994, Double Dragon was finally released into theaters, and on its opening weekend, it would place 12th at the box office and make just $1.3 million against its $7.8 million budget, before going on to make a worldwide total of just $2.3 million. And the movie would of course end up getting torn apart by critics as well. However, I really like how much responsibility Yukich takes in this interview, saying that all of the things the reviews called out were things that he was concerned about while on set, but didn't feel comfortable speaking up about because this was his first feature. And I just kind of really respect that attitude. Apologies for the interruption, but I wanted to jump in and let you know that this week's video is brought to you by the members of the Born to Rant Patreon and our channel members here on YouTube. Members get early access to all videos, access to exclusive videos every single month like these three. I am a completely independent channel, and if you'd like to support me past watching my videos on YouTube, memberships are a great way to do that. I've also set all tiers to be free on both platforms for a trial period. So if you've ever been curious to join, now's a great time to check it out. And with all of that out of the way, I think it's time for us to hang out with the Lee brothers, Ugg and Home, and talk about everything that makes Double Dragon still worth watching today.
Oh, I get it. Ugly.
And I think the main thing that still makes this movie worth watching today is the absolutely insane world that it builds for itself. It has kind of a The Warriors meets Escape from New York / LA vibe. Like, we've got all these different themed gangs that run the streets, and they kind of all rock. I'm a big fan of the mimes, and I mean, the Mohawks are so stupid and awesome, and I genuinely love Nils Allen Stewart in this role. If you didn't know, Stewart here is a legendary stunt coordinator with over 150 titles to his name on IMDb for stunts alone. He also has over 120 acting credits, with almost all of them being big enforcer characters with essentially no lines. Like, I bet this is the most he's ever talked in a movie, and he sounds so weird.
I already have the strength of 10 men. This thing will kill me.
But gangs aside, I do think the world itself looks a little bland. Like, I would say the biggest thing that disappointed me in rewatching this movie was just how flat a lot of the cinematography felt. And I'm a big fan of Gary Kibbe, especially his work with John Carpenter. I mean, he shot every Carpenter movie starting with Prince of Darkness, and I genuinely think that that movie is one of the best looking movies in Carpenter's filmography. It just has this really rich, deep look to it, and the way it plays with chiaroscuro lighting is actually incredible. So when I saw that Kibbe shot this movie, I started to think I was in for a real treat. And it's not that the movie looks bad. It's got some great looking sequences and moments throughout, and it does have some colorful moments that really pop. I guess I was just disappointed it didn't look like one of my favorite movies of all time, and I suppose that's on me. But anyway, Kibbe is actually not the only John Carpenter connection that Double Dragon has, because both stunt legends Jeff Imada and Al Long, who play Huey and Lewis, were also in Big Trouble in Little China, but there's also multiple other members of the stunt team that either worked on Big Trouble as well, or also worked on other John Carpenter movies. Just kind of a fun, weird little connection I found while researching this movie. As for the movie itself, we open with this great narration from Robert Patrick giving us the lore of the Double Dragon medallion before cutting to quote somewhere in China, which is just hilarious as an establishing card. Also, I couldn't seem to find where they shot this, but it looks so familiar. And if anyone recognizes the location, please let me know in the comments. We're then quickly introduced to our villains, and Robert Patrick is absolutely killing it as Kogo Shuko.
Find me the other half now.
First of all, he looks so cool. Like, this is maybe the most early 90s look of all time, but in my opinion, he is fully pulling it off. And he's also genuinely both fun and menacing throughout the entire movie.
I just want total domination of one major American city. Is that too much to ask for? Is it?
Then we meet our main heroes, Billy and Jimmy Lee, played by Scott Wolf and Mark Dacascos, respectively. And as a kid, I really loved these two. I was obviously a big fan of Scott Wolf as Billy just because he has all of the best one-liners in the movie.
You're weak like your father.
You're ugly like your mother.
But as an adult, it's also very clear that Wolf has like no martial arts background. Like, if you watch the fight scenes, his choreography is so basic, and he's also always using props and stuff to do the fighting for him, which is really noticeable when he's fighting alongside someone like Dacascos, who is a black belt and has continued to do martial arts stunts in movies for the rest of his career. So anyway, when we meet the Lee brothers, they're in the middle of a martial arts competition, and I actually really like how the competition sets up the dynamics between the brothers and Julia Nixon as Satori Yamada, who's their adopted guardian, for lack of a better term. Anyway, we see that it's clear that Billy is the immature, hot-headed one, and Jimmy is the one who really takes his time and thinks things through. And after Billy causes a giant brawl after losing, our heroes are on their way home, which is where we get to see a lot of the cool gangs and vehicles of the movie, and we get introduced to Stewart's beau, Abobo, and it leads to this really awesome chase, and I love the throwback 90s tech we get to see here. This is also where we meet Alyssa Milano and the Power Core, and why are these guys just standing facing this wall? Are they trying to blend in? They're not doing a very good job. Alyssa Milano is also killing it as Marion, the leader of the Power Core. Like, of our main cast, her and Robert Patrick really feel like the two that know what kind of movie they're in. Her dialogue has this kind of overly theatrical vibe to it that makes her feel both silly and awesome.
Here comes another airplane.
No more spinach.
A Bobo. Is that French?
And here is where the main plot of the movie fully kicks into gear. Shuko has half the medallion, Satori has the other, and thanks to our boy Bo Bobo, Shuko knows this. Also, real quick, Bo getting turned into this giant monster is so sick, but his scene at the end of the movie where he finally sees himself in the mirror is genuinely kind of heartbreaking.
Although I should point out that once Bo has been turned into the monster version of himself, I believe it's actually Henry Kingi under the makeup and not Nils Allen Stewart.
So with that information, Shuko and his crew decide to confront Satori and get the other half of the medallion. And we get a really fun action sequence through this movie theater and get to see the power of the medallion in full effect. And I know this looks kind of bad by 2026 standards, but I honestly think it's held up way better than it should have. And the sequence concludes with Satori getting blown up, but not before she can give the medallion to Billy. And I actually think it's kind of interesting that the first half goes to the less mature brother, but also they don't even figure out how to activate the thing until the end, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But from here, the movie really becomes a chase movie. Shuko pulls a Cyrus from the Warriors and calls a meeting with all the gangs and unites them under his rule. Once out of the burning theater, Jimmy and Billy are immediately caught by a bunch of the gangs and have to fight their way out, which leads to probably the coolest chase in the movie, the boat chase, which of course ends in this awesome explosion and the boys in the water, which they just told us was pure toxic waste before jumping in.
And if it gets in your mouth, you get diarrhea for a week and all your hair falls out.
And now that Shuko thinks the boys are dead, they're able to buy a little time and seek out Marion and the Power Core for help, which gives us two of my favorite bits in the movie. First, Marion spoon-feeding Bo cooked spinach, and the boys ignoring this sign because
Billy, it's a diversion. They want you to think it's the other door.
and then falling through this trap door, only for Marion to ask,
Why didn't you guys use the stairs?
Please use other door.
but in the end, they all decide to team up and go invade Shuko's building. Also, I love Jimmy's reaction to this plan.
I told you she had a plan.
It's not a plan.
That is too. It's a great plan. She's uploading the downlink.
It's a bad plan.
Unfortunately, the boys hear Shuko's voice and immediately bail on the plan to try and get the other half of the medallion. And them using this earring on fishing line thing is so fully insane to me. So this all leads to our final action sequence, which no joke lasts for almost a full 30 minutes. And I like the idea of Shuko possessing the dead bodies to fight the brothers, but it's really the final fight between the boys and Shuko that's my favorite. I also think the image of him splitting into two guys actually looks great even today. Plus, this creature design is actually so badass. I do have a little bit of a problem with Shuko being defeated because the lights are turned on, but really only because him not liking the lights is really only set up once at the beginning of the movie in a throwaway line.
Rest! Not until I have my shades on.
So at the end of the day, Shuko is defeated, makes a large donation to the LAPD, gets arrested, and makes some threats before Bo drives our heroes off into the sunset as they scream for help. So over 30 years later, what is the legacy of Double Dragon? Well, I think it exists as one of the better video game movies of the 90s. Sure, it's not nearly as great as Mortal Kombat, but it's not nearly as bad as Mortal Kombat Annihilation either. I think it exists in kind of a nice middle ground between the watchable and unwatchable video game adaptations of the 90s. But as a 90s kid ninja movie, I mean, I think this thing kinda rocks. It's got great designs, and I do absolutely love these costumes. It's just too bad they only get to wear them for a couple minutes at the end. Like, what is this, a Netflix original series? Other than that, this movie does kind of feel largely forgotten. You don't really hear people bring it up ever, but let me know in the comments, did you grow up with this movie? When was the last time you watched it? Would you ever want to see another Double Dragon movie? According to James Yukich, he's got an idea for a sequel that he's excited about. Oh, and this movie is currently available to watch for free via YouTube, although both the version on YouTube and the file I used to make this video weirdly have the cigarette burns from a film reel burned into them. So I'm guessing that the only version of this movie that's available is a 35mm scan done in like 2001. But if you know more about this, please sound off in the comments. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching, and as always, an extra special thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon and my channel members here on YouTube. I truly could not do this channel without your support. Don't forget that you can become a member at any tier on either platform for a free trial period by either clicking the button to join right under the video or heading to the Patreon via the link in the description below. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I am a completely independent channel, and I don't use any AI in the making of my videos, and if that means anything to you at all, your support would mean the world. And that's going to do it for Born to Rant this week. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.